この動画では、リスニング力を鍛えるために、歴史上の出来事を簡単な英語で解説します。リスニング力を上げながら、歴史も学びましょう。
The first moon landing.
最初の月面着陸は、1969年7月20日、アポロ11号のニール・アームストロングとバズ・オルドリンによって達成されました。それではリスニングスタートです。
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our English learning channel. Today, we will talk about one of the most amazing events in human history. It is the story of the first time people walked on the moon. This is a story about big dreams, great courage, and incredible science. Let's begin our journey to the moon. The year was 1969. The world was very different. There were no smartphones, no internet, and computers were very big and slow. But people had a very big dream. The dream was to send a human to the moon. This dream started with the President of the United States, John F. Kennedy. In 1961, he said a famous sentence. He said, "We choose to go to the moon." He said America would send a man to the moon and bring him back safely to Earth before the end of the 1960s. It was a very big goal. At that time, it seemed almost impossible. But many scientists and engineers worked very hard to make it possible. The mission was called Apollo 11. Apollo was the name for the American space program to go to the moon. The astronauts for this important mission were three men: Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins. They were all very experienced pilots and very brave. On the morning of July 16, 1969, a very large rocket stood at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. The rocket's name was Saturn V. It was the most powerful rocket ever built. It was taller than a 30-story building. Neil, Buzz, and Michael sat at the top of this giant rocket. Inside a small spaceship, millions of people around the world watched on television. The countdown began. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, liftoff. The engines of the Saturn V rocket started with a huge fire and a loud roar. The rocket slowly rose into the blue sky. It was an incredible sight. The journey to the moon took about 4 days. The spaceship was very small inside. The astronauts floated because there was no gravity. They had to eat special food from packages and drink from special bags. It was not very comfortable, but it was exciting. When they got close to the moon, the spaceship separated into two parts. One part was the command module, named Columbia. Michael Collins stayed alone in Columbia. His job was to fly around the moon and wait for the others. The other part was the lunar module, named Eagle. Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin were inside the Eagle. Their job was to land on the moon. On July 20th, Neil and Buzz entered the Eagle. They separated from the command module and started to fly down towards the moon's surface. But there was a problem. As they were getting closer, Neil saw that the computer was taking them to a place with many big rocks. It was a dangerous place to land. Neil Armstrong had to act quickly. He took control of the Eagle himself. He carefully flew the spaceship, looking for a safe, flat spot. He was very calm. But people on Earth were very nervous. They listened to the radio from the spaceship. The fuel was getting very low. There was only a little fuel left. Finally, they found a good place. Buzz Aldrin said, "Contact light." This meant the spaceship had touched the ground. Then, Neil Armstrong said, "Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed." Everyone at NASA Mission Control in Houston, Texas, was so happy and relieved. They had done it. They had landed on the moon. A few hours later, it was time to go outside. Neil Armstrong went out first. He slowly climbed down the ladder of the Eagle. As he took his first step onto the moon's surface, he said his famous words, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." This means that one step for a person is a very big jump for all people. It was a moment for all humans, not just for America. The world watched on television. The pictures were black and white, but they were amazing. The moon looked gray and empty, with many craters. Neil Armstrong moved slowly and bounced a little. This is because the gravity on the moon is much weaker than on Earth. Soon, Buzz Aldrin joined Neil on the surface. He described the view as magnificent desolation. It was beautiful, but also very empty and lonely. The two astronauts spent about 2.5 hours outside the Eagle. They did many important things. They collected rocks and dirt from the moon. They wanted to bring them back to Earth for scientists to study. They put an American flag on the moon. They also set up scientific experiments. One experiment was a laser reflector. Scientists on Earth could shoot a laser at it to measure the exact distance to the moon. They even received a phone call from the President of the United States, Richard Nixon. He said it was the most historic telephone call ever made. After their work was done, they went back inside the Eagle. They had to rest before leaving the moon. They left many things on the moon, including their heavy backpacks and the bottom part of the Eagle. This was to make the spaceship lighter for the trip back. Then, the top part of the Eagle fired its engine. It lifted off from the moon and flew up into space. Michael Collins was waiting for them in the command module. He was very happy to see them. He had been alone, flying around the dark side of the moon, where he couldn't talk to Earth. It was a very lonely job. The Eagle successfully connected with the command module. Neil and Buzz moved back into Columbia with Michael. Then, they let the Eagle go. It was left in space, orbiting the moon. Now, the three astronauts were together again in Columbia. They started their long journey back home to Earth. On July 24, 1969, they entered the Earth's atmosphere. This was a very dangerous part of the trip. The outside of the spaceship became extremely hot because of the air friction. But the heat shield protected them. Soon, 3 large parachutes opened from the spaceship. It slowed down and landed safely in the Pacific Ocean. Navy ships were waiting there to pick them up. The astronauts put on special biological isolation suits. Why? Because scientists were not sure if there were dangerous moon germs on them, or on the moon rocks. They went to a special quarantine trailer on the ship. They had to stay there for 21 days. Later, scientists learned that the moon has no life. So this was not necessary for future missions. When they came out of quarantine, the whole world celebrated them. They were heroes. They had done what people had only dreamed of for thousands of years. They went to the moon and returned safely. The Apollo 11 mission was a huge success. It showed that humans can do amazing things when they work together and use their knowledge. 5 more Apollo missions landed on the moon after that. But Apollo 11 will always be remembered as the first. Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins became legends. They inspired millions of children to study science and to look up at the moon and dream. The moon rocks they brought back helped us learn much more about our solar system. So, the next time you look up at the night sky and see the moon, remember that day in 1969. Remember the courage of 3 astronauts. Remember how all people on Earth watched together. And remember the famous words: "One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." Thank you for listening to this story. We hope you enjoyed it and learned some new English words. Keep dreaming big and learning English. See you next time.